Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is my favorite From Software game. Yes, even above Elden Ring. And in today's video, I'm going to try to explain what about this game is so special to me. All previous From Software games followed a relatively similar formula. You had a character that was created and tailored by the player to be exactly how they wanted to play the game. The levels and bosses all varied in terms of what strategies would be best to beat the level. Some levels were easier for mage builds and some for melee. And the gameplay loop was clearing an area of enemies and then searching for cool new weapons and equipment to play around with and upgrade. This does make for exciting gameplay, and each one of these games holds a special place in my heart. So don't get my message of this video confused with me saying Sekiro is objectively the best From Software game. But FromSoft, in my opinion, refined and perfected all the little things in their formula that made the other games so great. The first thing about Sekiro that caught my attention was its setting. The Sengoku era of Japan was always so fascinating to me, and I've always been a huge fan of ancient Japanese mythology, so those two things combined in one was enough to satiate my little nerd brain. The environments in Sekiro are absolutely breathtaking and range from treacherous cliffsides to lush bamboo forests with pagodas visible in the distance, to castles, to snowy mountaintops and poisonous swamps. Each area in the game felt like it was tailored specifically to give the players an incentive to traversal and exploration, with the addition of the grapple hook both when engaging in combat and exploring a new region. Sekiro's added verticality was a welcome change to the FromSoft formula, as up until this point the games didn't even have a true jump button, so to see these mechanics implemented so well in Sekiro was a welcome bonus. The game pushes this stealth when necessary mindset to the player to let them know they can zip past enemies when fighting looks to be too daunting of a task, but here on this channel we are no cowards, so the guns blazing approach is the only strategy in my opinion. The stealth factor to this game is nice in theory, but it behaves in a stranger way than it should. For example, you can walk right up to this guy and stab him in the back, and this guy's none the wiser, but at the same time, if one enemy spots you, then suddenly every enemy in the map, regardless of distance or obstacles blocking their vision, is alerted to your presence. I understand that this is clearly the design they were going for, but it results in far more tedious stealth gameplay than I think was originally intended. The good news, however, is that there are a few areas in the game that require stealth per se, but it's just kind of strange that they try to build habits of stealth in the opening sequence and then make enemy behaviors this way. Although, I know some would argue that the stealth is fine, and I need to quote-unquote get good. I do think one good execution of the stealth mechanic is during the Great Serpent sequences spread throughout the game. Towards the beginning, you'll find yourself scaling down the side of a cliff when the screen starts rumbling and you know something big is coming your way fast. With little time to think, you hide in this patch of grass before the Great Serpent shows itself, and it's your job to carefully sneak around it to progress. This section specifically is extremely tense and is the best execution of stealth Sekiro has to offer. Skipping through the patches of grass when the serpent isn't looking and then stabbing it in the eye to make a beeline to safety is one of the most heart-pounding moments in the game. But, you know what's more heart-pounding than a giant snake looking to dine on your flesh like a common field mouse? The combat, where I think Sekiro shines its brightest. Let me reiterate, Sekiro is my favorite FromSoft game, and the game's intense and high-action combat alone would be enough for me to die on that hill. Of all the games in the genre, Sekiro is the one I can pick up and dive right back into again like no time at all has passed. The flow of combat in Sekiro is like a dance between two highly skilled shinobi who are evenly matched. The clanking of steel against steel and that bonus clank when you execute a perfect parry is enough to hook me for 4 years after the game originally released. When there's a group of enemies keeping your distance and waiting for one to make their move is the best method of attack. This intense and high-speed gameplay is further augmented by the addition of the posture meter and the revive mechanic. Previous From Software titles had a hidden meter for the playable character called Poise, where a series of fully charged strong attacks could break an enemy's guard to allow the player to go in for the killing blow. In Sekiro, this meter is visible and is the main combat mechanic of the game. Instead of simply attacking to pierce through an enemy's defense to drain their health bar, sometimes it's best to attack for the sake of forcing the enemy to block and build up their posture bar. If the posture bar fills, and then finally breaks, in addition to the benefit of completely draining an enemy's health bar, performing a killing blow also benefits the player in giving them one of their revives back. And like the enemies, your posture bar is visible on the screen as well and can break just as easily. Simply holding L1 to block an attack is not good enough, as it will fill up your posture bar quickly. Instead, you'll want to time your blocks in perfect harmony with the attacks by the enemy. If you get the timing just right, you'll execute a perfect parry, and instead of your posture bar filling, the enemies will fill instead. I could spend hours just learning enemy attack patterns and parrying their attacks attacks, and FromSoft's choice to make a mechanic out of blocking for Sekiro was a fantastically executed one in my opinion. The philosophy Sekiro wants to get across to the player is, hesitation is defeat. If you see an opening in your opponent, capitalize on it. Stay aggressive without getting greedy. Of all the Souls-like games in the genre, I think Sekiro punishes the player the hardest for button mashing. Certain enemy combos cannot be stun locked in order to prevent this style of gameplay. Sekiro's combat is meant to be indulged in a controlled and calculated manner, and the player is given all the tools necessary to make sure that's possible. Another change Sekiro brought with it was the addition of the prosthetic tools in the combat arts. You have the shuriken, the flame vent, the axe, the firecracker, the spear, the mist raven, the umbrella, a little poison dagger, a giant leaf, and the finger whistle. Now admittedly only a few of these tools have any practical use in any one fight per se, but each one in conjunction can give the player some room for creativity in fights, and some tools even have some hidden uses with lore implications attached. I'm not going to lie to you, I was sitting here contemplating whether or not I was going to discuss the story of Sekiro, and my initial reaction was no. But considering the game is a little more straightforward with its story than any other game by FromSoft, I figured it would only make sense to do in this instance. You play as a shinobi named Wolf, or Sekiro. In the first half of the game, you find yourself trying to rescue your lord from his kidnappers in the Ashina clan. Before Lord Kuro is taken, he blesses you with the gift of immortality, which is exactly what his captors want with him in the first place. In Sekiro, you have these little orbs beside your health bar that each represent a revive that you can perform on yourself. Using a revive will bring you back to life with half your total HP and will let you continue playing like you never died. However, dying without a revive available to you and respawning at a checkpoint will possibly result in losing half of your total sen and may even spread the deadly dragon rot curse to NPCs you've encountered in the world, which, if left unchecked, will kill them, meaning you can no longer complete their side quests or utilize them as merchants. Dragon Rot can be healed by using a dragon's blood droplet, which is an insanely important item in Sekiro that will prevent NPCs from dying as you die and spread the Dragon Rot, so stock up on as many of these as you can. Sekiro differs from the other Souls games in the sense that this is the first time the main protagonist is completely characterized. Wolf has a voice actor. He has goals and ambitions, and instead of creating a character from the ground up, players instead will get to determine Wolf's fate through the course of the game. You meet the Sculptor, who has some significant parallels to you and will offer to upgrade your shinobi prosthetic. Emma, who is a doctor and serves as the person who can upgrade your healing gourd. Hanbei the Undying, who is also an immortal and can serve as a nice practice dummy when you need a refresher. Etc, etc. Side quests operate in basically the same way as previous games in the genre. However, in Sekiro, I can't help but feel some of the completion requirements for these NPC quests are a little vaguer and more difficult to accidentally stumble upon than in other titles. The second half of the game sees the player attempting to locate a special katana that can sever the ties of immortality from the individual, and then locating these immortals, killing them off one by one to cleanse the world of the dragon's heritage. Sekiro has multiple endings, including one that makes the runtime much shorter than the others, so the decision the player makes with the NPCs will affect the outcome of their story. Now, if the combat is the best part about Sekiro and the game is more story-focused than previous titles, then the boss fights are the best of both worlds. Sekiro has my favorite boss fights in the entire series of Souls games, and you can really see the attention to detail and passion that was put in with each encounter. Each boss fight feels completely different from the next, and the circumstances of the fights are different both story-wise and from a mechanical standpoint. The bosses in Sekiro were designed in a much more balanced and cohesive manner, each one building off the fact that the developers knew exactly what tools and weapons the players would have at any given moment, since in previous Souls games it was possible to play in a variety of playstyles with melee and ranged builds alike. Sekiro strips away that freedom of choice in designing a character to suit your playstyle and forces you to play only with your katana and shinobi prosthetics. Some people view this as a negative to the game overall, which is fair in my opinion, but I personally love this change because of its execution. These bosses whooped my ass so hard that I had to learn their every attack down to the pixel, and now I can jump back into the game after months of not playing and still be in rhythm. When I reached a new boss fight, I would spend my first attempt sitting back and playing defensively to learn their attack patterns, slowly but surely throwing in a few counterattacks of my own until I reached a point where I was on the offensive and the bosses were countering my attacks. Gyobu is the first real boss fight of the game, and you have to contend with him riding on horseback and swinging around a giant spear. Lady Butterfly hops gracefully through the air and her attacks are almost like dance moves. She's an old master and her skill is displayed through her various attacks and use of her butterfly kunai. Genichiro is a determined samurai who seeks to gain immortality through the dragon's heritage, and is the boss fight that solidified my love for this game. He will stop at nothing to get what he wants, and this characterization is shown through his boss fight. He comes at you with brutal combos combos, using both his sword and his bow to always keep you on your toes during the fight. In his third phase, he utilizes lightning in his attacks that are best dodged, unless you have Sakura Dance, and switches up a few of his combos as well. Genichiro was definitely my litmus test for this game, and it's hilarious in hindsight how practicing this game's mechanics can turn Genichiro from being one of the most daunting fights in the game to an absolute joke. As you move on to the second half of the game, the boss fights become bigger in scale and more difficult with each new encounter. I love the first fight with the owl and his cunning tricks he uses on the player, throwing a smoke bomb down to get a surprise attack in, trying to prevent you from healing, and even utilizing your firecrackers to stun you long enough to deal massive damage. I think the Divine Dragon fight is one of the most breathtaking in the entire series, and while its design is more of a gimmicky one, the visuals alone are enough for my enjoyment of it. Shooting a lightning bolt down at the dragon is especially satisfying. The Demon of Hatred fight is another one that stands out to me. Through the course of the game, you'll find yourself returning to the sculptor time and time again to upgrade your prosthetic arm, and if you gift him with tea or sake to drink, you will begin to learn more about his backstory. As you near the end of the game, you'll have a hidden option to eavesdrop on him and Emma talking in his hut, and reloading the area will cause him to say that you need to be the one to kill him. And finally, if you return to where you fought Gyobu at the beginning of the game, when Castle Ashina is on fire, the Demon of Hatred will be there, and you will unlock some hidden dialogue that reveals to you that it's actually the sculptor, and now you have to put him out of his misery. As I mentioned, all of the boss fights in this game are executed brilliantly, but Sekiro really saved some of the best for last in the Inner Father and Inner Ishin fights that are locked behind the Gauntlets of Strength. You can unlock these Gauntlets of Strength by playing through the game and defeating the bosses that are listed as a requirement on the Gauntlet. The Gauntlets serve as a boss rush mode where you can replay any boss fight in the game as long as you've beaten it on your save file, and because some bosses are locked behind certain endings, you'll have to replay the game on New Game Plus to unlock every Gauntlet. But I just want to state that this is my favorite feature FromSoft has ever added to one of their games, and I would have loved to see this implemented in Elden Ring as well. The Inner Ishin fight and Inner Father fights are a remix of the original fights, and add in some different combos and attack patterns to the characters, making for a fun rematch to tackle. Inner Father specifically is my favorite fight in the entire game, and it took me so many attempts to finally be able to conquer. Seriously, I don't think a fight has given me that much trouble since my first time playing Dark Souls, which I actually made a video about, so shameless plug, go check it out. And when I finally beat the Inner Father fight, my hands were straight up trembling from nervous anxiety, and I felt like I had finally mastered the mechanics of Sekiro for good. Oh, and I should mention that your reward for completing a Gauntlet of Strength includes a new skin for Wolf, so if you're into that kind of thing like I am, then that's incentive enough to try your hands at these bonus challenges. Most Soulsborne games are essentially RPGs that let players grind enemies to level up their stats, hoard all the weapons and armor they desire, and even call NPC and human allies for help. As challenging as those games are, they offer ways to help you navigate their difficulty curves. By comparison, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice feels like the FromSoft game that really just does want you to get good. I love Sekiro because it forces the player to only rely on their own ability, their sword, and the shinobi arts and prosthetics you will find through the course of the game. You can't summon NPCs or other players to help, and you can't endlessly grind to unlock a powerful new piece of equipment or the stats needed to give you any kind of notable advantage. Moreover, while other Soulsborne games let players tackle the challenges laid before them however they see fit, Sekiro forces the players into very specific playstyles. If you sucked at parrying in Dark Souls, Sekiro hands you a tissue and says, "Too bad." While this narrow focus can make victories feel extremely satisfying, it also removes that modular gameplay that lets players ease their way into the typical difficulty curve these games deliver on, and makes for one of the toughest challenges you will ever experience in gaming. And oh boy, do I love me a challenge. I wanted to take a quick second to say thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Also feel free to leave your thoughts on Sekiro in the comments below. I've made it a habit to read your comments when I started this channel, and you know I love getting a discussion going, so seriously, don't be a stranger. I also wanted to announce that this fall semester, after 6 long years, I'll be entering my final year of college. So I'll try my best to keep production of this channel rolling, but if I can't stick to my usual bi-weekly schedule, then bear with me. I don't plan on stopping anytime soon, and I have big plans for my next video, so stay tuned. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.